Hi everyone, today we're going to be doing a brake fluid flush on a 2019 QX60. The first thing we're going to need to do is pop the hood by pulling this latch on the driver's side here. We're going to pull the yellow release lever to the left and pull the hood up. So it's good practice to flush your brake fluid every 2 to 3 years. The reason is it gets dirty. But not only does it get dirty, brake fluid is actually hygroscopic. What that means is that it absorbs water. And if water gets in your brake lines, what's going to happen is that it'll actually boil off from the heat of the brakes, and you'll actually have very low brake pressure or no brakes at all. So you don't want that happening. It's better just to replace it and keep it nice and clean every 2 to 3 years. So before we take the cap off, I just want to make sure that I clean it as best as possible, get as much of the dirt and debris around the oil cap off as I can, so that we don't get any more dirt into the lines when we open it up. Now we're ready to remove the brake cap, set it aside. Again, I'm going to clean the edges as best I can here. Once we have the cap removed, we can see that there is a filter inside, and to remove it, we're just going to pinch the insides and pull it straight up. Alright, so we can see that the brake fluid is actually quite dirty, very dark. Should be much more clear, so it's definitely in need of a flush. Alright, so the next step is to remove as much brake fluid as we can from the master cylinder, and what we're going to use is a turkey baster. We don't want to take it all out, but we just want to take it at least to the min line right there. Alright, so like I said, we'll be using a turkey baster, and I'll be grabbing as much of that fluid as I can to the min line, and we'll be putting it inside of this plastic container here. Once we're at the min line, we're going to top the brake fluid up to the max line with some new brake fluid. And as per the warning on the cap, we've got to make sure that we're using .3, as that's what's specified for this vehicle. As I mentioned, we are going to be using this Prestone .3 brake fluid here, and it is corrosive, so we're going to be using gloves when we apply it. And now that the brake fluid has been removed, we can replace our filter as well. All right, we're adding some more here. As you can see, it is quite a bit clear, and that's what we expected to see in the color. And again, we'll take it right up to that max line. All right, so we are at the max line there, and we can replace the cap. All right, so the order that I recommend bleeding the brake lines is to start with the furthest brake away from the master cylinder. So in this car, it's going to be the rear passenger side. Then we'll follow that up with the rear driver side, followed by the front passenger side, and then finally the front driver side. So next thing we got to do is bleed the brake lines with the fluid that's currently in the lines. And to do that, there's bleeder valves behind each one of these wheels here. So the first one we're going to remove is the passenger rear. We're going to remove that tire just to get easier access to our bleeder valves behind the tire here. So before we jack the car up, I'm just going to break each one of these lug nuts here. While the tire is still on the ground. All right, so when we're jacking up the car, we want to get the jack on the metal frame right here. And I'm just going to get the jack centered between those two semicircles right there. Once those lugs are broken, we're just going to use our floor jack here and then use the jack stand to safely keep it in place. So our jack stand's in place. Just going to let her down. And now we can remove the tire. All right, so now we have access to our bleeder valve here. So the first thing we're going to do is just pull this little rubber piece out. Should just shimmy itself out. Rocking it back and forth. Perfect. So we're going to be using a 3/16 inch diameter clear hose. That way we can watch the color of the brake fluid as it comes through the lines when we bleed them. And we'll just attach that hose to the nipple at the end. It should just slide right on. And it should be nice and snug and not be able to pull away from the line. Alright, so we're going to put the other end of our hose into our container, and we want to make sure that that end is actually completely submerged in the old brake fluid because we don't want to draw any air into the brake lines. I want to have the hose elevated, so I used a twist tie just to tie it to the frame of the car here, and I just want to make sure that when we open the line, no air goes back into the lines, so we want to make sure that that hose is elevated. So now we're going to use an 8mm wrench and open the bleeder line by turning towards us. So it should be clockwise on the passenger side until we actually see some fluid start to enter the line. Okay, once the bleeder line is open, I'm going to go over to the driver's side and just press the brakes firmly all the way to the ground and start bleeding the valve. Alright, so we can see that we've drained about half our brake fluid, so we're going to go ahead and top that up. Okay, we topped it up to the max line again, and we're going to keep that process going until we have clean fluid coming out of the brakes. Alright, so we can see that the fluid is much more clear. So I think we can call this one done. I pumped it about 10 times to get the fluid to change color. So before we remove our hose, we're just going to make sure that we tighten this nice and secure. Alright. Finally, we can disconnect our hose from this nipple here and drain the remaining fluid into our container. Then we'll replace our rubber cap. As you can see, the brake fluid that we removed is actually quite a bit dirtier than the new brake fluid. So now we're done the rear passenger side. We'll repeat that same process for the rear driver side. Now we can replace our lug nuts, get them on as tight as possible, and then we'll let the car down and tighten them to 110 foot-pounds. So we're back down to our min line there, so we're going to top it up again, and then we'll repeat that same process for the rear driver side. So we have our brake fluid topped up again, and we will replace that cap on the master cylinder. So we're repeating that same process for the rear driver side. So first we'll remove this rubber cap. Twisting it off. There we go. Okay, so we're working on the rear driver side now, and for this line we're going to be pushing the bleeder valve away from us. Alright, so now we're on to our front passenger side. So we're just going to again remove this little rubber cap here by twisting and pulling. So this side uses a 10mm bolt, so I'm just going to loosen that up. Once I start seeing the brake fluid leak into the line and some air bubbles, I'm going to press the brakes myself. So I just slowly press the brake pedal all the way to the floor one time, and we filled our line up. We're not getting any air bubbles in it, so I'm going to repeat that process a couple more times. Okay, so our fluid is looking much more clear, so I think we're good on this line. We can tighten this bleeder valve back up, and we should be good to go on this side. Okay, so now we're just going to replace our rubber cap, and we'll repeat that same process on the driver's side. It's starting to look a lot more clear inside the master cylinder. Once again, before we start the next side, we're going to top it up to the max line. Okay, so we have our front driver side tire removed. Again, we're just going to remove this rubber cap by twisting and pulling off. There we go. Once again, we have that same setup. We have a 3/16 inch diameter hose hooked up to our bleeder valve. We have it hung from the suspension and the other end into our container. And because we're on the driver's side now, we're going to use that 10mm wrench and turn away from me. You can see the fluid start to drain into the line. Alright, so our fluid is looking nice and clear. So I think this line is good to go. So we can just retighten that bleeder valve. Then we can disconnect our tube and drain the full amount into the container. After completing the brake fluid flush, we ended up using a full container of new brake fluid, and the old brake fluid I'll just be disposing at my local landfill. There's a hazardous waste disposal area over there that I can drop it off. So that's how we do a flush of a 2019 QX60. I hope this video helps somebody else. Thanks for watching.